I still remember the exact moment my life fell apart. It was a Thursday afternoon, just past 3. I had left work early, something I never did, thinking I'd surprise my wife with tickets to Rome. We'd been struggling, sure, but I thought maybe a spontaneous trip would reignite whatever embers we had left. I even picked up her favorite macarons from that overpriced French bakery downtown. I was nervous, hopeful, like maybe I was finally doing something right. I opened the door to our apartment, expecting to find her on the couch, maybe scrolling through her phone or watching one of those cheesy romance movies she loved. But she wasn't there. What I did find was a half-packed suitcase on the floor, her red one, the one she only used for special occasions. My heart started to pound. At first I thought something was wrong, that maybe there was an emergency. But when I called her name, there was no answer, just silence. And the faint scent of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I walked into the bedroom, and that's when I saw it, a note on her pillow. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting match, just a note. 5 lines, 5 brutal lines. "I'm sorry. I need more than this. I'm with someone else now. His name is Brandon. He's good to me. He owns a jet." That was it. No apology, no explanation, not even a goodbye. I stood there, holding that paper like it weighed 100 pounds. My knees buckled, my stomach turned cold, and my mind, it raced. Who the hell was Brandon? What kind of person just vanishes like that? After 8 years of marriage, my name's Marcus Bell, 37, born and raised in Detroit. I built my company from the ground up, Belltech Solutions. We weren't flashy, but we were solid. Cybersecurity, small to mid-level contracts, nothing fancy. I wasn't broke, I wasn't cruel, I wasn't perfect, but I sure as hell deserved better than a post-it note goodbye. And all because some guy with a private jet came along and made her feel like she was missing out. I felt like a fool, like everything I'd worked for, every late night, every missed vacation, every moment I thought I was building a future, was nothing but a joke, a lie. I sat on the edge of the bed that night, staring at the empty closet space where her clothes used to be. My mind replayed every argument, every time she said, "We don't talk anymore," or "You're always working." And I kept brushing it off, telling myself I was doing it for us. But us wasn't enough for her. She wanted a jet, a man who could take her to Paris for dinner, not one who brought home macarons after work. And in that moment, something inside me broke, quietly. Not with tears, not with shouting, but with a kind of hollow silence that wrapped itself around my chest and refused to let go. This is the story of how I lost everything, and how I took it all back. The days that followed felt like I was walking through fog, numb, heavy, suffocating. I went to work, mechanically typing emails and sitting through meetings, but none of it registered. My employees probably thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. At night, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how I missed the signs, wondering how long it had been going on. Was it weeks? Months? Had she already emotionally checked out before she ever packed that suitcase? I kept going back to that note, those 5 lines, especially the last part. He owns a jet. It wasn't just about leaving me, it was about upgrading, trading in the man who built a modest company brick by brick for someone who could offer instant luxury, the illusion of power, prestige. That line haunted me. Her phone was still logged into our shared laptop. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't care. I needed answers. Needed to understand what the hell had happened to my marriage. What I found didn't give me closure. It only made things worse. There were texts, hundreds, photos too. Her sitting in what looked like a private jet, sipping champagne. Her on the deck of a yacht. Her in some beach resort I couldn't even identify. And then there were the messages. Long, gushing paragraphs where she talked about how free she felt. How she finally felt alive. And worst of all, she talked about me. He doesn't see me. He only sees work. I was invisible in that house. Marcus means well, but he'll never be the man you are. He doesn't make me feel like a woman, not like you do. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling. I felt like I'd been gutted. My wife, the woman I built a life with, was out there trashing me to another man while wearing jewelry I bought her. While sleeping in a bed I worked my ass off to afford. I started replaying everything in my mind, seeing it all with new eyes. The late night calls she said were from her sister, the sudden spa weekends with her friends, the way she used to flinch when I asked to see her phone, all the little things I brushed off because I trusted her. And then, as if the universe wasn't done rubbing salt in the wound, I ran into her best friend Tasha at the grocery store. We stood in the canned goods aisle, both pretending this was just another random encounter, but I could tell from her face. She knew everything. I asked her bluntly, "How long?" She froze, her mouth opened, then closed. "Marcus, I don't think it's my place." "Tasha," I said, my voice low, "don't do that. You know, you've known. How long has it been going on?" She looked at the floor. Almost a year. A year. 12 months of pretending, lying, sleeping next to me while texting him under the covers. I walked out of that store with nothing but a carton of eggs and a rage that buzzed under my skin like electricity. I felt stupid, played, and more than that, I felt small, like all my achievements meant nothing compared to one man with a jet and a smirk. But there was one thing Tasha said, right before I turned away, that stuck with me. She said you'd never find out, that you were too focused on work to notice. Too focused on work to notice. That line followed me home, and as I poured myself a drink, it clicked. That jet. That damn jet. I remembered a conversation we had a few months back. She'd mentioned a new client she met at a charity gala, a venture capitalist or something like that. Brandon Worth. The name had barely registered at the time. She said he owned aviation companies or tech startups or whatever rich people collected these days. I grabbed my phone and started searching. Brandon Worth. It didn't take long. The man was everywhere. Forbes lists, interviews, social media, photos of him standing next to luxury planes, giving TED Talks on innovation. There was one photo in particular that froze my blood. Him stepping off a jet, holding her hand. My wife, smiling like she'd won the damn lottery. I didn't know what hit me harder, seeing her with him so openly, or realizing she never thought I'd notice. That's how invisible I'd become to her. But I wasn't invisible now. I was angry. No, fueled. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about respect, about being discarded like some outdated phone while she strutted around in another man's spotlight. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to be the guy who got left behind in silence. Not anymore. I spent the next few days in silence. Not the kind that comes from sadness, but the kind that simmers with purpose. The kind that sharpens you. Something had shifted inside me. The grief was still there, sure, but it had hardened. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was armor. And if she thought she'd left behind a broken man, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I wasn't going to lash out or beg. I wasn't going to send drunken texts or show up yelling on someone's doorstep. I was going to be smart, strategic, surgical. I started with the bank records. We still had one joint account left open, the one we used for shared expenses. She must have forgotten about it in her rush to leave, or maybe she just didn't care. Either way, it gave me a window. And what I saw through that window made my stomach twist. Multiple transfers, repeated charges from luxury boutiques, spas, and high-end restaurants I'd never been to. One particular transaction stood out, a charge from a private jet charter service. 2 tickets, Miami to St. Bart's. The date? 2 weeks before she left. She was spending our shared money to fly out with him. I stared at the statement, that numb, electric rage pulsing in my veins again. That's when I knew this wasn't just personal. It was calculated. I started digging deeper, hired a private investigator, a guy named Vince who came recommended by an old friend from my college days. Ex-cop, discreet, efficient. I handed him everything I had, names, dates, screenshots, and asked him to get me everything. Spite or closure? He asked without even looking up. Strategy, I said, but I'm not ruling out both. While Vince worked his angle, I worked mine. I dug into Brandon Worth. Not just the surface stuff, the magazine covers and TED Talks, but his companies, his investments, his enemies. Turns out, behind the charm and polished veneers, Brandon was swimming in lawsuits, several whistleblower complaints. some buried SEC filings that hinted at shady deals and questionable offshore accounts. That's when an idea started to form, not just about revenge, but about leverage. I started making quiet moves at work, shifted some investments, liquidated a few assets, took a loan under the radar. And I reached out to a former client of mine, Monica Green, who now worked in acquisitions for an aviation conglomerate. We had done some cybersecurity consulting for her last year, and I remembered she'd mentioned Brandon once, not fondly. His company tried to poach one of our deals, she said over the phone. Didn't play fair. You ever think about buying him out? I asked. She laughed. Not until now. Why? I didn't answer directly, just told her I had something worth her time. We set up a meeting. At the same time, Vince delivered. He brought me a folder, real old school, manila, and thick. Inside were photos, time-stamped images of her and Brandon at hotels, private lounges, stepping onto jets. He had statements from drivers, copies of emails she'd sent from our family email account. One of them with an attached wire transfer request to Brandon's business under a fake consulting pretense. She wasn't just cheating, she was helping him launder money. That hit me harder than anything else. She wasn't just done with me. She had become part of his world, willingly, even criminally. Maybe she thought he'd loved her, or maybe she just loved the lifestyle. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was that now I had proof, not just of the betrayal, but of her complicity. The weight of it all hit me later that night. I sat alone in my apartment, glass of scotch in hand, looking at those photos spread across the table, and for a moment, I felt tired. Not angry, not vengeful, just tired. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me, about how I let things slide, about how I let someone convince me that stability meant success, even if it came at the cost of connection. But that part of me, the man who ignored the signs, who thought love meant sacrifice without boundaries, that man was gone. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was preparing. I started building a small team, quietly, carefully, a legal advisor, a forensic accountant, a PR strategist. I told them this wasn't a war, yet, but we were drawing the map, and if the time came, we'd be ready to strike without hesitation. In the meantime, I stayed, quiet. Let her think I was licking my wounds. Let Brandon think he'd won. I even sent her a message, short, polite, emotionless. Hope you're well. I'll be disconnecting the joint account next week. No hard feelings. She didn't respond, didn't matter, because while they were flying high on illusions, I was on the ground, laying the foundation. And when I was done, I wouldn't just take back my dignity, I'd take the damn jet too. It all came to a head on a Wednesday morning that felt deceptively ordinary. The sky was clear, traffic was light, and the coffee I grabbed from the corner bodega actually tasted good for once. But beneath the calm, everything I'd spent weeks preparing was finally in motion. Brandon Worth was hosting a private investor showcase at a high-profile aviation summit in Los Angeles, a spectacle for media, influencers, and international investors. He was set to unveil his company's latest acquisition, a new fleet of carbon-neutral private jets, flashy, greenwashed, fraudulent, and I had a front-row seat. I wore a tailored navy suit, the kind that made me look like I belonged in the room. I walked into the summit with Monica Green at my side, each of us carrying a portfolio. Mine held the evidence. Hers held the contract. The presentation was a spectacle, polished, dramatic, filled with buzzwords and fake humility. Brandon stood on stage in his signature charcoal blazer, grinning like a man who knew he'd already won. And there she was too, my wife, clapping from the front row in a designer dress I knew I'd paid for back when we still shared a life. When the lights dimmed for the Q&A, Monica raised her hand. Monica Green, Blue Path Acquisitions. Mr. Worth, before we discuss valuation, can you speak to the SEC filings from last quarter? There were discrepancies in your offshore revenue streams, particularly linked to consulting payments and wire transfers from unregistered accounts. The room shifted. A few murmurs. Brandon blinked. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with any... I stood up. I can help clarify that. Brandon's eyes met mine for the first time in months. The smirk faltered. My wife turned to look at me, and her face turned sheet white. Whatever cocktail of confidence and champagne she'd been floating on disappeared in an instant. "I'm Marcus Bell," I said calmly, projecting my voice. "Former spouse to the woman sitting right there, and founder of Bell Tech, a cybersecurity firm. My team conducted a private forensic audit tracing several fraudulent transactions from Brandon Worth's companies to a number of shell corporations in the Cayman Islands." Gasps. Phones came out. Cameras clicked. "I have emails, bank records, and a list of false invoices," I continued. "Many of them routed through a shared email account my wife and I once used for travel confirmations and house bills." She looked like she wanted to vanish. "And just in case anyone here needs visuals," I said, handing a flash drive to Monica, who plugged it into the projector. I brought receipts. The screen behind Brandon lit up with screenshots, emails, wire transfers, flagged invoices, all with his name, her name, and account numbers. Crystal clear. Undeniable. Brandon stepped forward, voice tight. "This is outrageous. You have no authority—" "Oh, but I do," I interrupted, "because I've already filed a complaint with the SEC, and copies of this evidence are with 3 investigative journalists sitting in this very room. I didn't come here for revenge, Brandon. I came here to dismantle the illusion." The silence in the room was thick. A few attendees stood and walked out. Investors whispered. One of Brandon's associates put a hand to his forehead and stormed off. And then she stood up. My wife. "Marcus, please. We can talk about this privately." "No," I said flatly. "You chose to humiliate me in public when you left without a word. You chose to spend our money on weekend escapes and wire it into his accounts. You chose this. Now own it." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know." "Yes, you did," I said, my voice cold now. "You just didn't care." Brandon tried to recover, called the whole thing a personal attack, claimed business competitors were weaponizing a bitter divorce. But it was too late. The room didn't believe him anymore. Monica stepped up beside me and dropped the final blow. "As of this morning," she said with a thin smile, "Blue Path Acquisitions has officially submitted a takeover bid for 2 of Mr. Worth's largest debt leverage properties. We now control his primary aircraft leasing division and the maintenance subcontractor for his jet fleet." Brandon's face twisted in disbelief. "And just so we're clear," she added, "Marcus Bell will be acting as interim chair of both boards while we conduct forensic audits." I looked directly at him. "You took my wife. You mocked my silence, but you forgot the one thing I never forgot, how to build, and how to rebuild even stronger." He didn't respond. He just stood there, cornered, exposed, and utterly powerless. And her? She didn't say another word. She just turned, heels clicking across the marble floor, walking away from both of us. No jet, no escape, just shame trailing her like a shadow. As I walked out of that room, flashes from reporters trailing behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not satisfaction exactly, but clarity, peace maybe. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I hadn't just exposed the truth. I had taken back the narrative, and now the man she left for a jet was working for the man who owned the fleet. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift and merciless. Brandon's empire unraveled like cheap thread. The media had a field day. Headlines like "Private Jet Tycoon Under Investigation" and "Luxury." It lies. The downfall of Brandon Worth splashed across every major outlet. The SEC launched an official probe within 48 hours of the summit. Investors pulled out. Partners went silent. One by one, his companies collapsed under the weight of their own deception. He tried to fight it at first, claimed innocence, called the evidence manufactured. But the paper trail was too tight, the truth too precise. There was no wiggle room, not with emails, transfers, and contracts all pointing back to him. My ex-wife disappeared from public view, deleted her social media, stopped showing up to events. I heard through Vince, my PI, that she'd quietly taken a job in real estate under her maiden name. No criminal charges were filed against her, but her name was smeared in the press. Some tried to paint her as a clueless pawn. Others weren't so kind. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't need to, because I wasn't trying to ruin her. I was trying to free myself. Still, late at night, the ghost lingered. I'd catch myself staring at the empty side of the bed, or reaching for my phone to text her before remembering she wasn't mine anymore. There were memories that clung like smoke, her laugh, her perfume, the way she used to kiss my shoulder before falling asleep. Even betrayal doesn't erase love overnight, but it changes it, forces it to evolve into something harder, sharper, clearer. And as much as it hurt, I knew I had done what I had to do, not just for justice, but for me. For the man who'd been overlooked, stepped on, laughed at. I began to breathe easier. The air in my apartment didn't feel so heavy anymore. I even started putting up some new artwork, rearranged the furniture, little things, but they meant something, a reclamation of space. At Bell Tech, things shifted too. My team noticed a change in me. I was more present, focused, not just working to build something, but to live again. And then there was the airline. The acquisition finalized a few weeks later. I didn't own the entire airline, of course, not yet, but I held the reins. I walked onto one of the jets a month later, alone, and stood at the top of the boarding stairs looking out at the tarmac. I smiled, not because I had won, but because I was no longer running from what happened. I had faced it head on, and now, standing there, I realized something powerful. They tried to fly away from me, and I had built the runway they launched from. Now, I own the sky. 6 months later, my life doesn't even resemble what it used to be, and I mean that in the best possible way. I wake up every morning without the weight on my chest. The silence in my apartment no longer feels hollow. It feels clean, free. I've started running again, cooking, reading novels instead of market reports. I take the long way home sometimes, just because I can. And when I laugh now, it doesn't feel forced or polite. It feels real. The airline, my airline, is doing better than projections predicted. After the acquisition, we rebranded, tightened operations, cut the dead weight, and leaned into sustainable aviation partnerships. Monica and I work closely, and every time we make a decision together, I remember the summit and what it took to get here. She once told me, power isn't about showing off, it's about showing up. That stuck with me. Funny enough, I've started mentoring a few young entrepreneurs, guys in their late 20s, early 30s, building startups the way I once did. They ask me about scaling, contracts, security protocols, but sometimes they ask about life too, about heartbreak, betrayal. One of them even asked, how do you survive when the person you trust most turns on you? And I told him what I had to learn the hard way. You don't just survive, you transform. You let the betrayal break you, but not to destroy you. You let it break the parts of you that were naive, that trusted blindly, that overgave and undervalued yourself. And when those parts fall away, what's left is something solid, something stronger, something unshakable. I still think about her sometimes, not with anger, not even with sadness, just reflection. I wonder if she ever looks back and questions it, if she ever realized that the man she left behind didn't crumble, but evolved. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But I no longer need that answer. I've made peace with the fact that people leave, that sometimes love isn't enough, not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't respected. And respect, that's something I'll never compromise again. I recently started seeing someone new. It's early, quiet, uncomplicated, and that's exactly what I want. No games, no illusions, just presence, connection, honesty. We talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes we sit in silence, and it feels like the most meaningful conversation I've had in years. I've also repaired some broken relationships, my brother, my college roommate, even a few old colleagues I pushed away when I was too deep in work to notice who I was becoming. I've learned that healing isn't just about cutting out the toxic, it's about watering the roots that still matter. And maybe most importantly, I've finally forgiven myself for not seeing it sooner, for trying too hard, for not trying hard enough. Life didn't give me a warning before it fell apart, but it gave me a second chance when I chose to rebuild with purpose. I look at the man in the mirror now, and I don't see the guy who got left for someone with a jet. I see the man who owns the airline. Betrayal has a way of forcing you to confront everything you thought was solid, your identity, your values, your blind spots. It strips away the illusions and leaves you staring at the truth, uncomfortable, raw, undeniable. But what I've learned is this: Heartbreak isn't the end, it's the awakening. When someone walks away from you, especially someone you gave your heart to, it feels like a theft, like they stole your future, your safety, your worth. But the truth is, no one can steal who you are. Not really. They can only reveal what you hadn't yet seen, how much more you're capable of becoming. Resilience isn't about bouncing back. It's about standing up differently than you did before, with clearer boundaries, sharper intuition, a deeper understanding of what you deserve. Justice doesn't always come in courtrooms or headlines. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in your peace, in your growth, in your ability to rise without bitterness and walk forward without needing revenge to fuel you. And true strength, it's not about domination. It's not about one-upping the people who wronged you. It's about choosing not to be defined by what they did. It's about reclaiming your narrative, owning your journey, and knowing, deep in your bones, that the world doesn't end when someone leaves. It begins. If you're listening to this and you're in that moment, the one where everything feels like it's falling apart, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not broken. You are becoming. Let them go. Let the silence teach you. Let the pain reshape you. And then, when you're ready, step back into the light with your head high, your heart wiser, and your purpose stronger than ever. Because the greatest revenge is not proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. Right to keep believing in your worth. Right to rebuild, even from ashes. Right to soar, on wings they never imagined you had. I was left for a man with a jet, and now I chart the skies on my own terms, and I never look back.